Apple pays Samsung billions of dollars every year. Let that sit for a second. The two most famous rivals in tech history. The companies whose product launches are watched like sporting events. The brands whose fans argue about in comment sections at 2 in the morning. Apple pays Samsung. Not once, not by accident, every single year, to the tune of billions. And Samsung doesn't just accept the money, it built an entire empire around it. In the next 14 minutes, I'm going to show you a business model so sophisticated, so quietly dominant, that most people, including most business school graduates, have completely missed it. This isn't a story about phones. It isn't a story about market share. It's a story about how one company engineered itself to win no matter what happens, and then kept that secret hiding in plain sight for decades. By the time this video ends, you'll never look at your phone the same way again. Samsung. Most people know the name. Most people own a product with it stamped somewhere on the box. But almost nobody truly understands what Samsung actually is. Ask someone on the street, and they'll say, phone company, Korean brand, competes with Apple. All true, all completely inadequate. Samsung is the kind of company that makes the global economy run, and does it quietly, from behind the scenes, in a way that most consumers will never notice. It doesn't need your attention. It already has your money. It generates over $230 billion in revenue every single year. That's not the Samsung Group as a whole. That's just one arm of it. It employs more than 300,000 people across dozens of countries. It built the world's tallest skyscraper. It makes the chips inside your laptop. It manufactures the screen you are watching this video on right now. And here's the part that should genuinely stop you cold. It makes money, whether Samsung wins or loses the smartphone war. That's the secret. Most companies are one bad product cycle away from serious trouble. Samsung built itself so that no single product, no single market, and no single bad year can bring it down. That's what we're unpacking today. Let's get into it. Here's the mental model most people carry around about Samsung. Samsung makes phones. Samsung competes with Apple. Samsung either gains market share or it doesn't. That's the story. That's the game. In every quarter, tech journalists publish the rankings and people cheer or groan depending on which side they're on. And look, that version of Samsung is real. It's just about 20% of the actual story. Because if Samsung's phone business collapsed tomorrow, the company would still be one of the most powerful corporations on Earth. That's not an exaggeration. That's a financial reality most people have never been asked to consider. Here's why that matters. Every time the tech press runs a headline like, Apple beats Samsung in global smartphone rankings, millions of people read it and think Samsung is losing, struggling, falling behind. Meanwhile, Samsung's semiconductor division is quietly shipping chips to Apple, Google, Amazon, Tesla, and half the Fortune 500. Its display panels are lighting up the faces of the very phones beating it in the rankings. Its factories are running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, generating margins that the smartphone business can only dream about. The press covers the boxing match. Nobody talks about the fact that Samsung owns the arena, sells the tickets, and built the ring. Samsung doesn't need to win the consumer war. It already won the infrastructure war. Let me show you exactly what that looks like. The smartphone business, the decoy. Yes, Samsung sells 250 million smartphones a year. Yes, the Galaxy S series is a genuine phenomenon. Yes, foldable phones are a category Samsung basically invented for the mass market, and the engineering behind those devices is extraordinary. But here's the margin reality that changes everything. Consumer electronics is a brutal business. You're competing with brands from every corner of the world. Apple from above, Xiaomi and Oppo from below, and a dozen others squeezing from every side. You're constantly cutting prices to hold market share. You're spending billions on marketing every year just to stay visible. You're running on tight margins in a market where consumer loyalty shifts with every new product announcement. The smartphone business is Samsung's most visible asset. It is not Samsung's most profitable one, not even close. And understanding that gap is the beginning of understanding what Samsung actually is. Semiconductors, the engine room. Now we get to where the real money lives. Samsung is one of the 2 or 3 most important semiconductor manufacturers on the planet. We're talking about memory chips, the DRAM and NAND flash that store data in every device you own, and logic chips, the processors that make devices think, calculate, and respond. The division that houses this business, in its best years, generated operating margins north of 40%. Let's make that concrete. For every $100 Samsung earns in chip revenue, $40 drops straight to the bottom line as profit.
For context, Apple, widely considered one of the most profitable consumer companies in history, runs overall margins roughly half that. The chip business, at its peak, is almost obscenely profitable. Samsung's chip customers read like a who's who of the technology world. Apple, Google, Qualcomm, Nvidia, Dell, Microsoft, virtually every major technology company building anything modern relies on Samsung-made memory. These chips end up in your phone, your laptop, the servers behind Netflix, the computers running your bank, the navigation systems in modern aircraft, the machines monitoring patients in hospitals. Samsung's chips are everywhere. You just can't see them. That invisibility is not a weakness. It is the strategy. Displays, lighting up the competition. Samsung Display is a division that deserves its own documentary. It manufactures OLED panels, the premium screen technology that defines the visual experience on flagship phones, tablets, and high-end televisions. Here's where it gets almost poetic. For years, Apple's iPhone Pro models have shipped with OLED panels sourced directly from Samsung. Think carefully about what that means. Two companies locked in the most famous rivalry in consumer technology, fighting for the same customers, the same shelf space, the same cultural dominance, and one of them is literally manufacturing the face of the other's most important product. Every time someone walks into an Apple store, picks up an iPhone Pro, and falls in love with that gorgeous screen, there's a quiet transaction happening in the background. Apple pays Samsung. Samsung smiles, cashes the check, and uses the money to build the next generation of its own products. Samsung gets paid either way. The rivalry is real. The supply agreement is also real, and Samsung designed it that way. This is not a conflict of interest. This is a business masterpiece. The hidden empire. Here's where most people's jaws drop, because the story goes even further than chips and screens. Beyond electronics, the broader Samsung group stretches into industries most people would never associate with a tech company. Samsung C&T, its engineering and construction arm, built the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, the tallest building in the world. Samsung Heavy Industries is one of the planet's largest shipbuilders, constructing massive vessels that carry global trade across oceans. Samsung Life Insurance is one of South Korea's most significant financial institutions. Samsung has interest in hotels, retail, chemicals, and more. This isn't diversification for the sake of it. This is a conglomerate, called a chaebol in Korean, that was deliberately engineered to be present at every major layer of economic activity. Whatever is being built, shipped, insured, or powered in the modern world, Samsung has likely had a hand in it somewhere. Samsung isn't a company, it's an ecosystem. And ecosystems, unlike individual organisms, are extraordinarily difficult to kill. Here's where everything clicks into place. The reason Samsung can do all of this, supply competitors, dominate multiple industries, absorb market shocks, fund decades of R&D, comes down to one concept. One idea that Samsung took further than almost any company in modern history. Vertical